Write using simple, accessible English with short sentences and everyday vocabulary. Use an engaging conversational style that feels natural and human. Avoid complex jargon or academic language. Make content easy to understand for readers with approximately an 8th grade reading level. Include concrete examples, analogies, and storytelling elements to illustrate concepts. Break up information into digestible chunks with smooth transitions between ideas. In the dark quiet of space, Captain Jiwoo Park stood on the bridge of Earth's first true starship, the ESS Pathfinder. She rubbed her tired eyes and gazed at the unfamiliar stars outside the viewport. 3 years into their mission, the crew had found plenty of empty planets and strange space rocks, but nothing that showed signs of intelligent life. Some days she wondered if humans were truly alone in the universe. That all changed on a Tuesday. "Captain, we're picking up a signal," said Officer Do-hyun Kim, his voice rising with excitement. "It's artificial. Definitely not natural space noise." The bridge fell silent. Even the constant hum of the ship's engines seemed to quiet down as everyone held their breath. "Source?" Park asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "About 2 light years. From our position, it's pulsing like a heartbeat." Park nodded to Communications Officer Minji Kang. "Let's hear it." The sound that filled the bridge wasn't what anyone expected. Not beeps or mathematical sequences, but something that felt almost like music, if music could somehow convey pure terror. "It's repeating the same pattern," Kang said, her fingers flying over her console. "The computer thinks it's a language, but nothing like we've ever recorded." For 3 days, the brightest minds on the Pathfinder worked around the clock to decode the message. Dr. Junho Lee, the ship's linguist, finally broke through. "It's a warning," he announced to the gathered command crew, "and a plea for help." The message revealed something humanity had never imagined. Not only were they not alone in the universe, but there was an entire galactic alliance made up of 17 advanced species. These weren't just aliens with different skin colors or extra limbs. Some were crystalline beings that thought in mathematical theorems. Others were collective clouds of gas that communicated through pheromones. Civilizations that had reached the stars thousands of years before humans had even invented the wheel. And they were losing a war. "They call the enemy Void Eaters," Lee explained, displaying ghostly images on the main screen. "From what I can gather, they're entities that literally consume stars and the life around them. If they're so advanced, why reach out to us?" asked Security Chief Hee-young Choi. "We're barely out of our own solar system." The answer came when Alliance representatives finally made direct contact. A shimmering hologram appeared on the bridge, a being with 4 arms and skin that shifted colors like oil on water. "I am Speaker Tool," it said in halting English, clearly using some kind of translation device. "We have watched your Earth for centuries." Park stood tall despite her racing heart. "Then why haven't you contacted us before?" The alien's skin turned a deep blue. "Your species was deemed primitive, too violent, too emotional, too unpredictable to join galactic society." Chief Engineer Sunwoo Bay snorted. "Well, thanks for nothing." "But now you need us," Park stated rather than asked. "Yes." The alien's colors shifted to something like embarrassment. "The Void Eaters breached our inner defenses last cycle. They are unstoppable by conventional means." It was Science Officer Jin Yong Kwan who asked the question everyone was thinking. "What changed? Why come to us now if we're so primitive?" The alien's form rippled. "Our scientists captured brain patterns from various species to study how the Void Eaters corrupt minds. Yours were the only ones that showed resistance." The room erupted in questions, but the alien raised all 4 hands for silence. "Something in human neural structure is uniquely disruptive to the Void Eaters. Your minds evolved differently than any species we've encountered. You think in ways that create patterns the Void Eaters cannot easily consume." Park felt a chill run down her spine. "What exactly are you asking of us?" "Earth must prepare for war," the alien said simply. "Not just any war. The final war for all conscious life in this galaxy. Without humans fighting alongside us, the Alliance will fall within 3 of your Earth years." The Pathfinder returned to Earth carrying news that would forever change human history. Nations that had fought each other for centuries suddenly found a common enemy. Old borders became meaningless in the face of extinction. 6 months later, Captain Park stood on a platform at the newly built Space Defense Center in neutral Switzerland, watching as thousands of volunteer soldiers from every country boarded Alliance ships. Some would train to pilot advanced fighters. Others would learn to operate weapons beyond human understanding. "Do you think we can actually win this?" asked her second officer Minho Yoon, as they watched the ships depart. Park thought about everything she'd learned about the enemy they were facing. Creatures that fed on stars. Beings that could corrupt minds and turn allies against each other. An enemy that had pushed 17 advanced civilizations to the brink of extinction. And yet, "The Alliance has technology we can barely understand," she replied. "But we have something they lost long ago. The stubborn refusal to go quietly into the night." As the last transport rose into the clouds, she added, "Turns out being primitive might just save the universe." 6 months flew by in a blur of activity as Earth transformed itself for war. Once secret military bases now housed alien technology. Children who once dreamed of becoming astronauts now trained to pilot ships that could bend space itself. The whole planet buzzed with nervous energy as humanity prepared to fight for not just their own survival, but for all life in the galaxy. At the heart of this transformation stood Dr. Hyun Kim, working late into the night in his makeshift lab. At the International Defense Coalition headquarters, his office walls were covered with brain scans, human brains alongside alien ones, their patterns dramatically different. "You're going to work yourself to death," said a voice from the doorway. Kim looked up to see Tae Lee, a former battlefield medic who'd become one of the first Human Alliance liaison officers. His uniform was crisp, but dark circles under his eyes told the same story of exhaustion everyone seemed to share these days. "Can't sleep anyway," Kim replied, rubbing his eyes. "Not with what I'm finding." Lee pulled up a chair. "Good news or bad news?" "Both, I guess." Kim pointed to the scans. "Look at this. Alliance species evolved in environments with fewer threats. Their brains developed for efficiency and specialization. They're smarter than us in many ways, but their thinking follows predictable patterns. And that's what the Void Eaters exploit?" Kim nodded. "Exactly, they're like mental parasites. They get into a mind, understand its patterns, and consume it from within." He tapped a human brain scan. "But humans, we're different. Our brains, developed while constantly fighting for survival. We think in chaotic, creative ways. We contradict ourselves. We believe impossible things. We hope when there's no reason to hope." Lee leaned forward. "And that's bad for the Void Eaters? It's like trying to digest glass," Kim said with a small smile. "Our thoughts cut them up from the inside." This discovery changed everything. Within weeks, thousands of volunteers lined up outside recruitment centers worldwide. Not just soldiers, but teachers, farmers, artists, and chefs, people from every walk of life eager to contribute their uniquely human minds to the war effort. The Alliance, initially hesitant about arming primitive humans, now couldn't convert them fast enough. Special chambers were built where human consciousness could be mapped onto combat platforms. Some humanoid, others more exotic, but all designed to carry that distinctly human thought pattern into battle. At the Korean training facility, General Jiwoo Park inspected the latest batch of recruits. She had risen quickly through the ranks, her experience with first contact making her invaluable to Earth's defense effort. "They look so young," she said, quietly to Lee, who had become her right-hand man. "They're scared but determined," Lee replied. "Like all of us." A young recruit stepped forward. Mina Kang, barely 21, a former nursing student. "General Park," she said, standing at attention. "I have a question about the conversion process." "Go ahead." "The Alliance officers said our bodies stay here on Earth while our minds control the combat platforms. Will we feel things? Pain? Fear?" Park hesitated, then decided on honesty. "Yes, the neural link is complete. You'll experience everything as if you were physically there." Instead of backing away, Kang straightened her shoulders. Good. I want to feel it. I want to know what we're fighting for. This was what puzzled the Alliance most about humans. Their capacity to walk toward danger rather than away from it. The Alliance species had evolved to avoid pain and maximize comfort. Humans somehow found meaning in suffering. In his lab across the compound, Dr. Kim was meeting with Alliance scientists. Their tall, spindly bodies and large eyes still seemed strange to him, even after months of collaboration. Your species continues to confound us, said Chief Scientist Vel, its translator making its musical language understandable. You volunteer for combat knowing you may die. You choose pain when you could choose safety. Kim shrugged. It's what makes us human. No, said Vel, its large eyes blinking slowly. It is what will make you heroes. 2 weeks later, the first human combat units were deployed. Lee led a team of 50 consciousness-transferred fighters to defend an Alliance mining colony under attack. They were given a simple objective: hold the line until reinforcements arrived. No one expected them to do more than survive. What the Alliance witnessed instead was something they had never seen in centuries of warfare. Human fighters didn't follow traditional battle formations. They created distractions, set traps, and employed strategies that seemed illogical until they worked brilliantly. When one approach failed, they immediately tried something completely different. Lee's squad was supposed to hold for 6 hours. They held for 36, and when Alliance reinforcements finally arrived, they found not just survivors, but victors. The mining colony was secure, and the Void Eaters had been driven back with losses that the Alliance had previously thought impossible to inflict. Word spread quickly. Humans weren't just resistant to Void Eater influence, they were effective fighters against them. Their unpredictable tactics confused an enemy used to logical, predictable responses. Back on Earth, General Park received the reports with a mixture of pride and concern. The Alliance was now requesting 10 times the human volunteers initially asked for. Countries were competing to provide the most recruits, seeing it as a matter of national pride. We're becoming too valuable, she confided to Kim during a rare, quiet moment. The Alliance is starting to see us as weapons, not allies. Kim nodded grimly. And what happens after the war? If we win? That's what worries me, Park replied. We're showing them everything humans can do. Our creativity, our determination, our willingness to sacrifice. Things they've never seen before. Things they might fear once they don't need us anymore, Kim added. As night fell over the compound, they watched new recruits practicing with Alliance technology, learning to merge their consciousness with machines that could travel between stars. Young faces filled with determination, hope, and fear. Unlikely heroes preparing to save a universe that had, until recently, considered them too primitive to bother with. One problem at a time, Park said finally. First, we survive this war. And then? Kim asked. She smiled slightly. Then we teach the galaxy what humanity really stands for. The news hit like a hammer blow. The Void Eaters had consumed Nalaris, the Fourth Alliance homeworld to fall in the past year. Billions of lives snuffed out in days. The holographic display in the war room showed nothing but empty space where a vibrant civilization had once existed. They're getting faster, General Jiwoo Park noted grimly. The other military leaders, human and alien alike, fell silent as the implications sank in. High Commander Zoe of the Alliance forces clicked its mandibles in what Park had learned was a sign of deep distress. Our conventional tactics are failing. The Void Eaters adapt too quickly. Park studied the battle maps showing the enemy's advance. Something about their movement pattern nagged at her. They're not just adapting, she said slowly. They're predicting. They know exactly how your forces will respond. Because we respond logically, said Tae Lee, who had been promoted to tactical advisor after his success in the mining colony. Defense. Alliance military doctrine has been refined over thousands of years to be perfectly efficient. And perfectly predictable, Park finished. She straightened up and looked at the Alliance commanders. With your permission, I want to deploy human forces differently in the next engagement. Commander Zoe hesitated. Your suggestions? No suggestions. No plans submitted in advance. I want complete tactical freedom for human units. The Alliance representatives bristled. One of them, a crystalline being that communicated through light pulses, flashed angry red. Unacceptable. All battle plans must be coordinated through Central Command. That's exactly the problem, Lee interjected. The Void Eaters have figured out your playbook. We need to throw out the book entirely. After hours of heated debate, desperation won out over tradition. Park received her authorization. Human combat units would operate independently in the upcoming battle for the Sirius Outpost, a key strategic location. 3 days later, Park stood before the assembled human fighters, or rather, their physical bodies, lying in rows of connection pods while their minds controlled combat platforms light years away. Forget everything the Alliance taught you about proper engagement protocols, she told the room of silent, linked humans. I want you to fight like humans have always fought when our backs are against the wall. Dirty, creative, and unpredictable. The battle for Sirius Outpost began as a conventional engagement, but quickly evolved into something the galaxy had never seen. Human units deployed guerrilla tactics from Earth's long history of warfare. They set decoys and ambushes. They retreated when expected to advance, advanced when expected to hold position. One squadron, led by Lieutenant Mina Kang, deliberately crashed damaged fighters into Void Eater vessels, something no Alliance pilot would consider, as their tactical computers would calculate such actions as wasteful. Another team reprogrammed communication buoys to emit conflicting signals, creating confusion in the perfectly ordered Void Eater formations. For the first time since the war began, the enemy faltered. Back on Earth, Dr. Hyun Kim monitored the neural feeds from the human fighters with growing excitement. Look at this, he told his research team, pointing to the wave patterns on his screen. Every time our fighters do something completely unexpected, there's a ripple effect through the Void Eater communication network. They're experiencing confusion. Kim's assistant, Jun Bei, leaned closer to the display. I thought they were just consuming physical matter. Stars, planets, people. That's what we all thought, Kim replied. But they're not just destroying, they're feeding. And what they're consuming isn't just physical energy, it's consciousness itself. This revelation changed everything. Working through the night, Kim and his team analyzed combat data and made a startling discovery. The Void Eaters weren't separate entities but parts of a vast hive mind that fed on predictable thought patterns. Human minds, with their chaotic creativity and emotional responses, were like poison to this system. The following day, Kim presented his findings to General Park and the Alliance High Command. They're quantum parasites, he explained, showing 3D models of the strange energy patterns that made up the Void Eaters. They evolved to feed on consciousness, specifically the kinds of ordered, logical thought patterns that most advanced civilizations develop. And human minds? Asked Commander Zoe. Like trying to eat soup with a fork, Kim said with a small smile. Our thought patterns are too messy, too contradictory. We think with emotion as much as logic. We make intuitive leaps. We believe things without evidence. All these things create neural patterns that disrupt their feeding process. Tae Lee, who had been quietly listening, suddenly leaned forward. So we're not just resistant. We're actively harmful to them. Exactly, Kim nodded. Every time they try to consume a human mind, it's like biting into something that fights back. This discovery led to a complete overhaul of battle strategy. Lee worked with both human and Alliance engineers to develop a revolutionary combat doctrine. Small teams of human operators would control not just single platforms but swarms of automated systems, creating complex, unpredictable patterns that would fragment the enemy's hive mind. Think of it like this, Lee explained to the first group of operators. Your mind is special. It thinks in ways the Void Eaters can't predict. When you control multiple platforms simultaneously, you spread that unpredictability across more targets than they can process. The first deployment of this new strategy came sooner than anyone expected. A Void Eater fleet approached Proxima Centauri, the star system closest to Earth. If it fell, humanity's home would be next. From her command center, Park watched as 300 human operators took control of nearly 3,000 combat platforms. On her screens, the formations looked chaotic, almost random, nothing like the precise movements of Alliance forces. "This looks like madness," Commander Zoe commented, multiple eyes blinking in concern. "It is madness," Park replied. "That's the point. The battle began at dawn. Alliance forces held the center in traditional formations, while human-controlled swarms harassed the enemy from all sides, never staying in one pattern long enough to be predicted. The Void Eaters, faced with an enemy they couldn't anticipate, began to show signs of distress, their normally fluid movements becoming jerky and uncoordinated. 6 hours into the battle, something unprecedented happened. A sector of the Void Eater fleet broke formation and retreated. Then another. By nightfall, the entire enemy force had withdrawn. For the first time in the war, the Void Eaters had lost a major engagement. In the aftermath, as damage reports came, in and casualties were counted, Lee found General Park standing alone by the observation window looking up at the stars. "We won," he said quietly, coming to stand beside her. "This battle," she corrected him. "But they'll adapt. They always do." "So will we," Lee replied confidently. "That's what humans do best." Park turned to him with a tired smile. "You know what the Alliance commander said to me after the battle? We've been fighting this war all wrong. We've been trying to be smarter than the Void Eaters, when we should have been trying to be more human." They both looked up at the night sky where trillions of lives hung in the balance depending on humanity's desperate gambit. "Then let's show them just how human we can be," Lee said. The mood in the command center was tense but hopeful as General Jiwoo Park reviewed the newest defense plans. 6 months had passed since humanity's tactics had forced the Void Eaters to retreat for the first time, and much had changed. Earth technology now integrated with Alliance systems throughout their defense network. Human engineers had redesigned alien weapons to be more unpredictable. Human artists had even contributed, creating visual and audio patterns that disrupted Void Eater communication. "They're adapting to our chaos," Park told her assembled officers. "But we're adapting faster." The holographic display showed Proxima Centauri, Earth's nearest stellar neighbor and now the front line of the war. Intelligence reports indicated the Void Eaters were massing for their largest assault yet. "If Proxima falls, Earth is next," Park said simply. No one needed reminding what was at stake. Lieutenant Mina Kang, recently promoted after 3 successful campaigns, studied the enemy formations. "They've changed their approach. Look at those patterns. They're intentionally disorganized now." "They're mimicking us," said Tae Lee, who had become Park's most trusted advisor. "Learning to be unpredictable." "Can they really copy human thinking?" asked a young officer. Dr. Hyun Kim, who had joined the military briefing, shook his head. "They can imitate the pattern but not the source. It's like a robot trying to dance. It might copy the moves, but it doesn't feel the music." The following day, Park took command of the combined fleet, an unprecedented merger of human and Alliance forces. 75,000 consciousness transferred. Humans operated everything from small fighters to massive capital ships. Meanwhile, Lee led the ground forces on Alpha Centauri B3, a contested colony world that had become a primary battleground. "Ground team in position," Lee reported through the neural link. His physical body remained safe on Earth, but his mind controlled a combat platform on the distant world. Around him, similar platforms carried the consciousnesses of 10,000 human fighters. "Fleet ready," Park confirmed from the command ship. "All units stand by." The Void Eaters struck at dawn, their attack more coordinated than ever before. Thousands of their dark, shifting forms descended on Proxima Centauri, moving with new patterns that showed they had indeed been studying human tactics. The battle that followed would later be called the longest day in history texts. For 20 hours straight, human and Alliance forces fought desperately against an enemy that seemed numberless. Park directed the space battle with grim determination, using every trick and tactic humans had developed over centuries of warfare on Earth. On the surface of Alpha Centauri B3, Lee's ground forces faced an equally brutal fight. The Void Eaters had landed in force, their fluid forms able to seep through the smallest openings in defenses. "They're getting through Sector 7, shouted Captain Jiho Yoon as his team fell back from an overrun position. Lee redirected reinforcements and opened a private channel to Earth. "Dr. Kim, what's the status on the special project?" Back on Earth, Kim stood in a heavily guarded laboratory surrounded by a combination of human and alien technology. "We're ready," he replied, his voice tense. "But I should warn you again. This is completely untested. The simulations show a 40% chance of catastrophic feedback to all connected operators. That's better odds than we're facing right now," Lee said grimly. "General Park has authorized deployment. Send it through." Kim took a deep breath and activated the device his team had been developing in secret for months. Empathy Matrix online. Transmitting now. Across the battlefield, human operators received a new data stream directly into their neural links. Unlike normal tactical information, this carried emotional content, human feelings amplified and weaponized. Not just any emotions, but specifically those the Void Eaters had never encountered: compassion, self-sacrifice, hope in the face of impossible odds. Lee felt the Matrix activate inside his mind. Suddenly, he wasn't just controlling his combat platform. He was sharing his fundamental humanity with those around him and receiving theirs in return. 10,000 human minds linked not just tactically but emotionally, creating a network of shared experience that rippled outward. The effect on the Void Eaters was immediate and dramatic. Their coordinated attacks faltered as they encountered something completely alien to their hive mind: emotional complexity. Where before they had been able to predict logical responses or even mimic chaos, they now faced something they couldn't process: the paradoxical nature of human feeling. "It's working," Park exclaimed as she watched enemy formations breaking apart in confusion. "Push forward." The Alliance forces, bolstered by the strange new energy emanating from their human allies, pressed the advantage. For 3 more hours, they drove the Void Eaters back on all fronts. Then something unexpected happened. Deep within the enemy fleet, something changed. The Void Eaters began to emit strange energy patterns as if communicating in an entirely new way. "General," came Kim's urgent voice over the comm. "We're detecting unusual activity in their central mass. They appear to be reorganizing." Park watched the displays with growing concern. "Are they adapting to the Matrix?" "No," Kim replied, his voice filled with wonder. "I think they're experiencing emotional response for the first time. Our emotions are changing them." As if to confirm his theory, a portion of the Void Eater force suddenly withdrew from combat, pulling back to form a defensive perimeter around their central mass. The rest fought on, but with decreasing coordination. On the ground, Lee noticed the same pattern. They're protecting something, he realized. Not just retreating, they're shielding their core. Kim's analysis came quickly. "We've located what appears to be their central consciousness, the hub of their hive mind. It's vulnerable right now, confused by the emotional input." "Then that's our target," Park decided. "All forces converge on these coordinates." For the next hour, the combined fleet hammered at the Void Eater defenses, driving toward their newly vulnerable center. On the ground, Lee led a special operations team directly toward what sensors indicated was a physical manifestation of the enemy's central consciousness. "I see it," Lee reported as his team breached the final defense line. Before them hovered a shifting mass of dark energy pulsing like a heartbeat. "It's beautiful in a strange way." Park's voice came through the neural link. "The fleet can't get through their outer defenses. You're our only shot, Lee." Lee looked at the Empathy Matrix controls on his combat platform. The device was designed to transmit human emotional patterns outward. But to affect the central consciousness directly would require something more. A direct connection that would almost certainly be fatal to the operator. "I understand," he said calmly. I'll need to boost the signal to maximum and establish direct contact. There was a long pause before Park responded. The neural feedback would be, Lee, there has to be another way. There isn't, he said simply, and we both know it. As his team provided covering fire, Lee advanced toward the pulsing core of the Void Eater consciousness. He'd never told anyone, but during his years as a battlefield medic on Earth, he'd developed a theory that empathy was humanity's greatest strength, the ability to truly feel another's pain and joy as one's own. Matrix at maximum capacity, he reported. Initiating direct contact in 3, 2, 1. Lee pressed his combat platform's hands directly into the swirling mass of the Void Eater consciousness and opened his mind completely. Through the empathy matrix, he poured not just his own experiences, but the collective emotional history of humanity, love and loss, joy and grief, hope and despair, the entire spectrum of human feeling concentrated into a single overwhelming flood. The effect was instantaneous. The Void Eater central consciousness pulsed violently, sending shockwaves through its entire network. Throughout the battlefield, enemy forces suddenly stopped fighting, frozen in place as if listening to some inaudible command. Then, one by one, they began to withdraw, not in retreat, but in something that looked remarkably like contemplation. Chantir. Earth. Dr. Kim watched Lee's vital signs flatline as the neural feedback overwhelmed his connection. We've lost him, he reported quietly to General Park. His consciousness couldn't survive that level of connection. Park closed her eyes briefly in sorrow, then returned to the task at hand. Status of Void Eater forces? Retreating on all fronts, came the reply. Not just here. Reports are coming in from across Alliance space. They're pulling back everywhere. As the battle ended and the counting of losses began, Park stood alone in the command center looking at the display where Lee's neural signature had been. The victory had come at a tremendous price. Half of Earth's volunteer force lost, including one of its finest leaders. Yet something told her this wasn't just a military victory. Something fundamental had changed in their enemy. For the first time since the war began, she allowed herself to think about a future beyond survival. What did you show them, Lee? She whispered to the empty room. What did they see in us that made them stop? The answer would come later, but for now, the galaxy breathed a collective sigh of relief. The final stand had become an unexpected turning point, not just in the war, but in the very nature of the conflict itself. 3 months after the Battle of Proxima Centauri, General Jiwoo Park stood at the observation window of the Alliance Council chamber. The massive space station orbited a neutral star at the galaxy's heart, hosting representatives from all 17 Alliance species. Today marked a historic first. Earth would be formally welcomed as the 18th member. Park smoothed down her dress uniform, thinking about the cost of this moment. 50,000 human operators lost, their consciousness unable to return to their bodies after the neural connections were severed in battle. So many families on Earth mourning loved ones who died saving civilizations they'd never even seen. Among those lost, Lee's absence still felt like an open wound. His sacrifice had changed everything. The final deployment of the empathy matrix hadn't just stopped the Void Eaters, it had transformed them. A soft chime indicated it was time. Park took a deep breath and entered the council chamber. The room hushed as she walked toward the center. Beings of all shapes and sizes watched her. Crystalline entities that communicated through light, gaseous collectives that shimmered with internal energy, and dozens of other forms that defied easy description. General Park of Earth announced, High Counselor Veth, a towering 6-limbed being whose species had founded the Alliance millennia ago. You stand before us as the representative of humanity, the saviors of our collective civilizations. Park bowed slightly. Humanity stands ready to join as equals, not saviors. Humility, noted another counselor, its translucent body pulsing with blue light. Another uniquely human trait that confounds us. The formal ceremony proceeded with speeches and symbolic exchanges, but Park found her attention drawn to a quiet figure watching from a side chamber. Dr. Hyun Kim, now heading the research team studying the fragments of Void Eater consciousness recovered after the final battle. Later, as the reception began, Kim approached her with excitement barely contained in his usually calm demeanor. "We've made a breakthrough," he said quietly, guiding her to a private alcove away from the celebrations. "The Void Eater fragments. We've finally been able to communicate with them." Park's eyes widened. "They're still conscious?" "In a way. And they've revealed something remarkable." Kim activated a small holographic projector, showing swirling patterns of energy. They weren't always destroyers. Originally, they were a peaceful species from another galaxy, beings of pure energy who evolved beyond physical form. "What happened to them?" "Isolation," Kim replied. "They existed for so long without contact with other consciousness that they forgot what connection felt like. They became hungry for it, consuming other minds to fill the emptiness inside themselves." Park processed this revelation. And Lee's direct link with the empathy matrix reminded them what they'd lost, Kim finished. He didn't just attack them, he shared with them. Genuine emotion, connection, empathy, things they hadn't experienced in millions of years. The implications were staggering. The enemy they'd fought wasn't inherently evil, just profoundly lonely, driven mad by isolation. It explained why the Void Eaters had withdrawn rather than been destroyed. They weren't defeated. They were awakened. 2 days later, Park stood before the Earth Defense Council back home, explaining her controversial decision. "We're establishing the Interspecies Empathy Institute," she announced to the assembled leaders. "Dr. Kim will head research efforts to integrate what we've learned about consciousness and connection." "You want to study the very things that nearly destroyed us?" demanded General Min Ho-yoon, who had taken over tactical operations after the war. "I want to understand them," Park corrected. "The Void Eaters weren't born destroyers. They became that way through suffering we can barely comprehend. Isolation drove them mad. Suffering we understand all too well," noted Council President Jia Song. "Perhaps that's why humanity could reach them when the Alliance couldn't." This became the foundation of Earth's unique contribution to the galactic community. While Alliance species had advanced technology, humans brought something equally valuable: emotional intelligence and empathy, born from millennia of struggle and resilience. In the years that followed, the galaxy changed in ways no one could have predicted. Alliance species that had once looked down on humans as primitive now sent their brightest scholars to Earth to study human philosophy, art, and culture. Music and poetry from Earth spread throughout the galaxy, touching alien minds with concepts they'd never considered. Most remarkably, the recovered Void Eater fragments, now calling themselves the Rememberers, began working with human scientists to heal the damage their kind had caused. They couldn't restore consumed worlds, but they could help rebuild and protect what remained. 5 years after the final battle, Park visited the memorial erected on Proxima Centauri B3, where Lee had made his sacrifice. The monument was unlike anything in Alliance tradition, not a grand statue or imposing structure, but a simple garden with plants from all 18 Alliance worlds, surrounding a pool of water that reflected the stars above. As she laid her small token among thousands of others left by visitors, Park noticed a young Alliance child, a member of a crystalline species, asking its parent a question. Why did the human give itself to save others it never met? The child's translator conveyed. The parent seemed at a loss for how to explain such an alien concept. Park knelt beside them. Because he understood something fundamental, she told the child gently, that all conscious life is connected, that your joy and pain matter as much as his own. The child's crystalline form shimmered thoughtfully. Is that why there are memorials to him on 17 worlds? Not just to him, Park corrected, but to all humans who fought, who showed the galaxy that connection is stronger than consumption. As sunset painted the garden in golden light, Park watched Alliance visitors from a dozen worlds mingling with human tourists. Children from species that would have never met playing together. Scientists and artists exchanging ideas that would have been impossible before. This was Lee's true legacy, not just victory in war, but transformation. The galaxy was healing, growing, evolving in ways no one could have imagined before humans joined the galactic community. Back on Earth, in what had once been Dr. Kim's laboratory, the Interspecies Empathy Institute had expanded into a sprawling campus. Here, humans taught alliance species about emotional intelligence while learning about technologies beyond their understanding. But the most important work happened in a quiet room at the center, where human volunteers connected with the rememberers through a refined version of the empathy matrix. Together, they explored the fundamental nature of consciousness itself, not through logic or calculation, but through shared experience, through story and emotion, through the very things that had once made humans seem primitive but had ultimately saved all sentient life. That evening, as Park prepared to attend another diplomatic function as Earth's representative on the Alliance Council, she paused to look at the stars visible through her window. Somewhere out there, the former Void Eaters were beginning their own healing journey, learning to connect rather than consume. "We did it, Lee," she whispered to the night sky. "Not just survival, something better." The stars twinkled back, silent, but somehow comforting, as if to say that in the vast darkness of space, connection was the greatest light of all.